Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining. Lots of you have been waiting in the waiting room. Super keen this morning, so thank you so much. It's 11 o'clock. We are due to start. I will just give people a couple of seconds to log in. As we all know now, today in our wonderful world of online meetings, that people often turn up, suddenly think at 11, and then the tech doesn't work, and it takes a few minutes to jump in. But yes, very, very warm welcome and thank you to everybody who is here today and is joining us. For those of you that have not met me before, my name is Francesca Salussolia. I'm the CEO of Goal 17 and Wowment. I'm here today to share with you not just the work that I've been doing, but the amazing work of my team. And we've got some of our team here. We've got Beth, Samantha, Sam's here. So quite a few of the team are here. I think Sarah's just joining, and they're all here to support us as we go through the session. A couple of quick housekeeping things. The plan is just to be talking to you guys for around about 45 minutes, making sure that we've got some time for questions after. There has been a huge amount of interest in this. I'm feeling very flattered and almost a little bit nervous. We've got over 200 people registered to join us today. If you're watching this live, a lovely warm welcome to you, but also if you're watching this on catch up, because I had so many people reaching out and saying, please, could they have the recording? So I know there's a lot of people joining this as a recording as well later, but thank you to those of you that have joined us live. So as I say, 45 minutes, we are recording it for the purposes of sharing it with those that can't be here live today. I'm going to make sure there's time for questions at the end. Please do keep yourself muted during the main part so I don't lose my flow too much, but really excited to have questions at the end. Right, I think we should probably get into it. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. If not, I'm sure my team will tell me. So what is this all about and who is here today? We have got such an interesting collection of people here today. Everything from people in local authorities, in children's services, lots of people from the NHS. We've got policymakers. I know we've got a few politicians that have joined us here today, and a whole complete range of people from different backgrounds. And that's really flattering because I think it says a lot about what we've been doing and what we've been achieving. Some of you are here for the second time because some of you joined me when I did a very similar presentation to this almost a year ago. And those of you that were there will know that it was a very open and honest presentation where I really shared some of the challenges of things that we were facing. And again, I'm hoping to bring that real honesty here today because what I want to do is share with you some of the things that we've learned, some best practice so that you can apply it to whatever your field is. I'll talk about where we've applied this, but of course, if you're working in a different setting, the idea is that I'm hoping you can take some things away from today and really be able to apply them. We have only got this sort of short hour together, and there is so much. So I'm sure this is something that will continue into a conversation, but at least if I can give you the headlines. And I know all of you that are here should have received that report. You also would have all received some emails from me saying, what would you like to learn? And that's been so interesting. So thank you to so many of you that replied. And there were some real detailed, specific questions, which I may not be able to get into. So I will try and make sure that I get back to everybody on all their specific questions. But really, if I looked at what everybody asked, it came into two real sets. One was, what was working in reaching these hard to reach young people, regardless necessarily of age? What were the things that we found that worked? And secondly, lots of interest in the technology and the data that's made this possible. And actually, more than anything, people were asking me about the technology and the data. So I am going to obviously make sure that I cover that and weave those two things through, as well as some of the other things that people have asked. So that being said, let's get stuck in. And I want to get stuck in by giving you all a little bit of context to understand what this project is about, because I know I've got some peers on this call that have been involved in this project, but we've also got people from completely different fields. So I want to just contextualize what we're talking about. So Goal 17 as an organisation was commissioned by 5 local authorities who were all funded by the Department for Education to go and support some young people who were described as hard to reach. They were all care leavers and were seen as some of the young people in our society that face some of the biggest challenges. And you'll see some of the stats on the screens there. There's 50,000 of them, 39% in not education and employment, which is much higher than their peers of similar age, 80% feeling isolated and so on. So a really group of young people that are seen as very, very hard to reach. and that needs some help. And the Department for Education invested £30 million across a whole range of local authorities in different areas in two key programmes. One was around lifelong links, which we're not going to cover today, and the second was around befriending and mentoring. And the idea was really simple. The idea is that you have these young people who have a lot of adults around them that are there to support them, whether those be teachers, personal advisors, social workers, mental health support workers. They're all there to support them and providing support. But often that support is very targeted. Those the young people that are receiving that support know that those supporters have caseloads, that those supporters know their history, and that those supporters have to report back on what they've discovered about that young person and how they're doing. And so the idea of this program, the befriending and mentoring, was to find somebody that was, in the words of the young people, outside the system, outside these usual regulatory systems that could be there, that they wouldn't be paid, that they would not necessarily have any agenda, targets, or caseloads. And that's quite unusual in this space, to be providing young people with someone that really has no agenda. They don't have, a neat target to hit or anything like that. They're literally just there to be useful to that young person. So that was the premise of what we were doing and how we were going to do it. And really the reason, because it was felt that there was a real reason to kind of do that. And I'm going to start off with something maybe a little bit provocative. And to be fair, I'm actually not going to lie to you. AI suggested this. And I checked it and I went, I'm not sure that's true. And then I went, okay, no, maybe it is. So these young people were described as hard to reach. But what I'm going to show with you is some evidence that suggests that maybe it's not that they're hard to reach. Maybe it's that the services that we're providing them are actually hard for those young people to engage with. And that's the premise that we took when we looked at this. We said, okay, we're being told that these young people are hard to reach, but why don't we frame that differently? Now, we could debate this all day long, and we're not going to bother doing that. But what I want you to do as we go into this is frame that as going that these are maybe not hard to reach young people, maybe the services that we're delivering them are hard to engage with. And as we talk through this, the other thing I want you to keep in your mind is we're going to be talking very high level, talking stats and those kind of things. But behind every single one of these conversations and these stats are real young people who face real challenges, and also real incredible volunteer mentors that have stepped up and done some incredible things. So we will be talking high level, but please don't lose sight of the fact that these are real lives and real young people that we're talking about. So I said I'd be quite honest and to an extent vulnerable here. I'm going to talk to you about what happened in the first year of this funding, the first year that we delivered this care leaver mentoring for these local authorities and on behalf of the DFE funding. And in the first year, we got to the end of the first year, and I would like to say that we were contractually compliant. I think that is the way to say it. We had done an incredibly good job of recruiting a lot of volunteers. In fact, to an extent, we had over-recruited on volunteers. And when I presented this a year ago, we were talking about what we'd learned and the successes that we'd had in recruiting volunteers. But we also were very honest at that point, going, we're recruiting these volunteers, but actually we're having a real challenge that we're not getting the young people engaging. And on the scales that these programs were requiring, we were just not getting enough people that were stepping forward and saying, yes, I want to mentor. And even if they did step forward, what was happening is that they weren't actually engaging in those relationships. So by contractually compliant is the statistics that were requested by the Department for Education were how many young people were seen as receiving support. And receiving support basically meant they'd had a conversation with someone and they were open to it. But it didn't necessarily mean that they were in a relationship that was going to change things for them. They were just kind of on paper, yes, they were receiving support. So we didn't feel very comfortable about this, and we spent a lot of time looking at this. And the reason that that statistic for us, it was 52%, nationally it was 62%, so we were a little bit below, but we're sort of contractually compliant. The reason we didn't feel comfortable about this is, although yes, we were ticking the box and we were 52%, we knew that a lot of those young people weren't having the results that they wanted. But it was really difficult to measure what does success look like in this. Receiving support was seen as success because that we could measure that we'd engaged with a young person and maybe they'd been matched with a mentor. That was easy to measure. Much harder to measure whether that relationship was making a difference to that young person's life. So we decided to go and have a deeper look, which meant looking at every single relationship individually, very time consuming, but we had a deeper look and we set our own criteria of what success actually looked like. And we said actually success was when that young person was regularly meeting with that mentor, they were making some level of progress. We didn't say what that progress was, but it was a regular meeting and it was a sustained relationship. And when we set that criteria, unfortunately, the results got worse. We were down at 30%. So just 30%. Now, interestingly, when I presented this a year or so ago, I had lots of people from the sector reach out to me and go, to be fair, in this space, 30% is amazing. That's really good. But I wasn't willing to settle for that. I didn't feel that that was right. And the rest of the team didn't as well. And we really wanted to push things forward. So we knew something had to change. And that was when we then started exploring. What I'm going to share with you is the three most significant changes. In fact, they are the real three changes that we made. And these are changes that not only applicable to this, but I'm sure are transferable to a range of different services. So I'm going to be quite a little bit generic about them. So if you're coming, for example, from an NHS background, I hope that this will make sense to you as well, or any other background. So the three changes, just quickly headlines. The first thing we changed is how the referral process worked. I'm going to talk you through exactly where it was and where we moved it to. The second thing we changed was the channel that we communicated with young people on. And the third thing that we changed was the structure of what we thought mentoring was and what those meetings were. And this was all underpinned by some technology that enabled us to do a lot of this. And again, as I say, I'll go through each of those things. So the first thing was how we received the referrals. Now, keeping in mind that slide that I showed you a minute ago, where we said that these mentors were outside the system, one thing that we realised from year one was the referral and the way that they came to us was very much inside the system. We were very much relying on our local authority partners and the personal advisors, who are like the social workers that work with these young people, to, for want of a better phrase, sell mentoring to these young people and get them encouraged by it, with the expectation that they would come to us and we would then be ready to get a bit to know them a bit and match them up. But what happened is that that wasn't working. And it wasn't the fault of the personal advisors. They were doing an incredible job. In fact, they were probably doing more than they needed to be doing. But what was happening was that because of the way that it was coming from them, the framing of it was wrong. It felt statutory. It felt like any other referral. And when we were talking to the young people, they couldn't really see the difference between this. It felt like something else that was going to be inside the system. So what we did is we changed it completely in terms of asking the PAs, actually, all we want you to do is have one warm conversation with those young people. And Beth, who's here, went around and worked with all the personal advisors and sort of trained them how to have that initial warm conversation and say, look, would you like somebody that's kind of outside the system? This is what they'll do. They're just there to be useful to you, and so on. And they would then pass that referral to us, but we would then take do the effort of actually reaching out to that young person, building a relationship with them, building trust with them, and making them realize that this was something that was worth their time. And it took a huge amount of effort to do that, but it was the right thing to do. And I'm going to give you an idea of how much it did. So one of the things that we did was think, well, let's start to reach out to them and take on this work ourselves. And so we started reaching out to them by email, and inevitably they just don't check their emails. And if they do, they don't reply. We then started phone calls, and funnily enough, every time a number comes through and they don't know who the number is, they don't answer. I'm guilty of that. I don't answer my phone if nobody answered. And we had, I'm moving a little bit forward because we'd also tried with our mentors, because this impacted our mentors as well in terms of the way that they reached out to the young people. We even tried things like dedicated apps and different systems to connect with young people. And again, it was just too much effort and too much login, too much friction to get people to the young people to engage in that way. And so actually what ended up happening is every time we tried one of these methods, we found that the only place that they were communicating with us was on WhatsApp. And if we wanted to reach out to them, we had to change our approach and we had to start reaching out to them on WhatsApp. So we decided then to shift our channel, which goes a little bit into what we did next. So Beth, who's here, Beth, give us a wave. Those of you that have got your cameras on can see Beth. I might make Beth blush here. Beth did the most incredible job. She's actually up for a National Royal Award with the team for the incredible work that she did here. But she started reaching out to those young people, and she did over 7,000 interactions with young people over the last year, trying to get them to engage and to understand how we could get them to work. And very quickly, a pattern appeared. And one of the things that's quite interesting is rather than just Beth reaching out, we started analysing some of these interactions. So using technology, we looked at what was happening in those interactions and started to see that a pattern had appeared. To be fair, Beth had already picked up this pattern and was applying it directly, but we were able to bring a bit of science around it. And so, for example, we were able to understand 5 key things that worked. So when we started reaching out to young people, originally we did long messages. Hi, I'm Fran from Goal 17. We're this organisation that do this, and we want to help you with this, and so-and-so's referred you, and blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't getting very good results, even on WhatsApp. And over time, Beth progressed that to a simple introduction, such as, hi, I'm Beth, how are you? And that was the introduction that would go to young people. And we started to realise that 5 key things were always true. If we personalize, so it's, hi Sid, it's Beth, how are you? Personalizing it with their name made a difference. Keeping it short. If a message was under 100 characters, it got a reply 4 times faster than if it was over 100 characters. If we made it sound too professional, the engagement rate dropped from 56% on the first message to 21% on the first message. So all of these little indicators, use of emojis, all of these things started to make us realize, okay, there is a different way to engage the young people, and we started to progress those systems. You can see more details about that in the report and some of the breakdown of some of those communication methods. But interestingly, in general, it took 23 messages backwards and forwards on WhatsApp before we got a young person to engage with us. So this was the bit that was missing previously in that referral channel. It was not being able to build that relationship. And when we looked at some of those conversations that Beth had been having, it was very conversational. It was very normal. It was not the kind of conversation that a young person would normally have within the system. It was a very, very normal interaction back and forward, building that trust. And so at the end of those 23 messages, we were usually at the point where we had a young person that was now willing to accept phone calls from us, wanting to create a profile, engaged in the mentoring, and wanting to be matched. So that was the first really big change. But this also obviously leads into this second change, which was the change of the channel and the change to WhatsApp. And quite frankly, that was meeting young people where they were at. And so we knew that if this was going to continue and this was going to scale, we needed to extend that form of communication to our volunteer mentors. But of course, whilst we wanted to provide that lovely, fluid, informal communication, meeting young people where they're at the place where they want to communicate, that came with a bit of a bit of a tension, because what about safeguarding? What about risk? How are we going to manage connecting these volunteers with young people? Yes, of course, we had DBS checked them, interviewed them, referenced them, we'd done everything. But if we were going to scale this, how were we going to do that safely? And it was that challenge that originally made us start to think about the technology that I know so many of you are interested in, which is we branded it Wowment. This was something that we built purely and selfishly for ourselves, to overcome this challenge. And it has been pretty groundbreaking. So let me explain to you what it is. I know some of you will be aware of this because some of you have been looking at it. So Wowment, quite simply, is a bridge that sits between WhatsApp conversations. And for us, this has been completely groundbreaking. So what it means for us is that we can connect a young person and a volunteer mentor, or anyone else for that matter, in WhatsApp without them exchanging their contact details. So for them, it just feels like a normal conversation. It's just like another WhatsApp chat, just the same as the one that they'd have with a friend or a peer. It's exactly the same place. No new apps. It's in WhatsApp. It's just like a normal chat channel. It goes to a normal number. but we're actually sitting in the middle. We've got this patent pending piece of technology that sits in the middle. And what that means is a couple of things. If we ever needed to, we could switch that communication off. So we've got control over it. It means that we've got that level of protection because we're not sharing personal contact details. But what it also means is that because every message is routed through WowMont, we have the ability to use some AI, or anything else for that matter, but use some AI to help both monitor or support or do any kind of processing as those messages go through. Interestingly enough, when we spoke to young people about this and we said to them, are you okay if we, if we sit in the middle? They really don't mind. I think I had a chat with somebody from Microsoft the other day who said the way that younger people engage with data is they're actually really not that fussy about their own data. So I spent a lot of time talking to young people saying, is it okay? We won't read your messages. And they were like, no, it's fine. They're really not that interested. Obviously, we put some really strong ethics around this. And we've made the commitment that we'll never, for example, sit and look at an individual young person's message, but we will anonymize it and look at trends and so on. And same for our mentors. Our mentors were very happy knowing that there was this safeguard in place that was there for them to support them. So once we introduced this very simple piece of tech and we were able to match up young people, things again started to move, and we started to see a much more increased rate of engagement, and this starts to kind of build through, and that will eventually lead to the third section, the third kind of breakthrough that we had. But before we get there, I want to tell you about how we built some AI stuff in the middle here, because this made a huge difference to us as a team. So as those messages were going backwards and forwards, what our AI was able to do was to monitor that. We've been able to build some dashboards. So, for example, for safeguarding. And so every time messages are sent, the AI monitors them and it will flag automatically things and then send them to our team. So, for example, it might say, look, this message has come in and there's a boundary concern. In this case, it was a mentor suggesting meeting at his home with a potential third party present, raises questions about appropriate mentoring boundaries and safeguarding protocols. It would pick up the smallest things and sometimes the bigger things and would alert our team immediately and say, look, you just need to know from this messaging, we're sensing this. If ever there was something that we felt was so severe, it would, for example, it would block personal addresses, personal phone numbers and email addresses so that those couldn't be shared. But if it was something that was so severe, we could set it to actually just instantly pause that communication until we could get involved and do it. But majority of the time, it was actually you'll see on here we have boundary concerns, I can't speak today, distress indicators. A lot of the time it was things like distress indicators, very few, or disclosure of harm, very few. I don't think we saw any inappropriate contact, but again, it would pick up if something was inappropriate. But often it was actually the young person that would be disclosing something that maybe is beyond what we would expect a volunteer to have to deal with. And that gave our team the opportunity to quickly review this and go, do we need to act? Is there something that we need to do? Now, 9 times out of 10, because again, the Goal 17 team are amazing. I know I'm biased, but I do think you guys are all amazing. The amazing team that I have working for me. Normally, when one of these came up, they'd say, oh no, we already know about that. We're already all over it. It's all fine. And we already know that the young person's having those challenges. We're already supporting the mentor. But if they didn't, it gave us the opportunity to pick up the phone to the mentor and say, is everything okay? Or to pick up the phone to the young person, or to go back to our local authority clients and say, look, guys, there's something going on here. Are you aware this young person's struggling? Is there anything that we need to do? Can we provide them with any more support? So that safeguarding was hugely helpful. And interestingly enough, in the final program data, it revealed that 1 in 8 meetings between volunteer mentors and young people involved a safeguarding or crisis point. So this wasn't something that was unusually happening. This is part and parcel of delivery with these hard to reach young people, that they are constantly facing real challenges and crises. And we were then able to actually support them better. The other thing that we also built was a dashboard to help our team focus their time, to know what was going on in these relationships and how best to support them. So, for example, if a relationship had gone quiet, here's a live example that I took back in January, that there was a relationship that had 381 interactions in between it, but suddenly it had been block of period before that relationship had continued. So again, that gave our team time, and I can't show you the full amount because obviously the confidentiality of the young people, but what it would also tell them was what had been going on in that relationship, just a summary note of what had been going on, and also some of the maybe what the last communication was, and it would even go as far as giving them a suggested next action of what they should do. So it's best to, you know, WhatsApp this young person and say this kind of thing. So it gave them that level of support. And again, what it's done is it's given the team an ability to focus their efforts, to know where do we need help, where do we need to focus, who needs the most help, who needs the most support. So being able to have this kind of communication platform suddenly meant that we could now start matching more. Those matches were effective. And to give you an example, we're seeing thousands of interactions between each pair now. We're not even talking about hundreds. Some of them are starting to move into the thousands. So these interactions were really, really working. And that led us to the third shift. And the third shift for us was very much a mindset shift. I think when we started these projects, we felt that mentoring was these face-to-face meetings where young people would get together with their mentor, they would sit down, they would chew the cud for an hour, they'd make some progress, they'd build some trust, and they'd moved on. But once we provided this level of communication for our young people, something very interesting happened. We started to realize that the mentoring actually does happen in those meetings, but more of it happens actually outside the meetings. And we started to see, as I say, 939 interactions on WhatsApp over 389 days between one pair, like huge volumes of interactions. And what was happening is that there were lots of small, we like to call them now micro connections. So rather than being these formal meetings, there were lots of these small micro connections that were happening all the time, averaging just 28 characters in length. So these are just short, sharp messages. Interestingly, 54% of interactions started by young people. So they stopped being a mentor chasing their young person. The young people were engaging just as much, if not even a tiny bit more than the mentors, and actually starting the conversations. There was an average of 2 days between messages in general, or a median gap of 2 days between messages. And interestingly, again, a lot of messages were outside traditional working hours. So what we're seeing happening is that not only is the communication happening in that, what we saw in the messaging was super interesting. That was where the actual real help was happening. That was where young people were saying, I'm really struggling with this. And often we would see the mentor say, do you want to pick up a call? And they'd be like, no, actually, I just want a message. Any of us that have teenage children will probably relate to this and go, it's obvious. Like, in a way, once we saw this, we were like, of course this is obvious. If I want my kids to come down to dinner, I'm going to get more response if I send them a WhatsApp message than I am if I try and shout at them, or dare I say go and speak to them face to face. They actually communicate in this way, and especially with some of the young people that we are working with who have had very challenging starts to life. They struggle with anxiety and other challenges. And a face-to-face meeting, for example, can feel really intimidating. And so again, we started to see some trends and patterns, and we'd see that it would take sometimes around 3 months for a young person to actually build the trust in that relationship through lots of these little messages before they went, yeah, actually, let's pick up a call or let's meet. And so not only was the mentoring happening in this, but the trust was building. And we would see this very, very common trend that it would go from 3 or so months of texting, then they would pick up a voice call, which again, they can all do through WhatsApp as they've done. And then eventually that would often then lead to those face-to-face meetings. And that cycle would continue. So it really shifted the way that we saw mentoring working and the way that it is working. And it shifted the way that we support mentoring now, because if young people are going to get more support through those micro connections, then that's what we need to support. So where did this end us? Well, as I say, 30%, not particularly proud of that, to be fair. I would still be here if we were still 30%, probably telling you what didn't work. But I'm super pleased to tell you actually what we did really did work. And I think it worked. It almost gives me shivers up my spine because I think it works better than we ever expected. We are now at an 82% engagement rate. And that isn't a selective group, that's across all 5 local authorities that we're working with. It is from all the new referrals that came in, but it also, super interestingly, goes back to the referrals that came in the first year that we didn't get anywhere with. that we went back and re-engaged some of those that had completely kind of, blocked us and weren't interested. Even some of those, in fact, quite a large proportion of those came back and re-engaged. In the report, we've got the actual stats. I can't remember off the top of my head. So 82% are suddenly making that regular interaction with their volunteer mentor, talking to them on a regular basis and making progress. So we were absolutely overjoyed by that we were now seeing this regular communication. But even better than that, it didn't stop there, because my next question would have been, well, that's great that they're chatting, but is it making any difference? And one of the incredible things that we've been able to now see, thanks to Wellman, is we've been able to have a look in, and again use our AI to understand what is actually happening in those relationships. And what's happening is mega. It is, again, beyond what we expected. So, for example, we know that 54% of the young people that joined this program as a mentee were NEET. And yet, without interviewing or surveying a single young person, purely from looking at their interactions, we can evidence that 69% of those that were NEET made a progression through the program. And even better than that, we can actually look at what are the trends. What did the mentors do? How did the conversations go that meant that 69% made progress? And again, you'll find in the report that there are 5 key factors, such as they were proactive, resource finder, network activator, emotional ballast, personal bridge, and consistent presence. All of that's in the report on page 17. But we can actually start to look at the trends. What were the volunteers doing that meant that they were able to progress those young people from 69, well, from 0 in that case to 69% of them, or 69% of them make those progressions. 30, coincidentally, again in the report it outlines is 38% actually moved into education, training, employment, and then sort of 31% were making progressions, were in the process of going through interviews and so on. So it's wonderful to see that, but I think the really important thing here is that not only could we see that, but we could evidence it again without having to bog these young people down with yet another survey, with yet another interview, with another thing that felt statutory. We've been able to see this purely from the interactions, because if the mentor has helped them get a job interview, they tell us the first person they've gone and told when they get the job is their mentor. So because they're telling them through WhatsApp, we've been able to capture that. Interestingly, I mentioned before, 1 in 8 meetings dealt with a crisis point or a safeguarding issue. That in itself was incredible to know. To be fair, I think it was higher than we expected it to be, maybe naively, but it was a little bit higher than we expected to be. However, the other thing that we could see was, what were the mentors doing to de-escalate that? Were they de-escalating, and what were they doing? And fascinatingly enough, the mentors were absolutely fundamental in de-escalating crisis. So again, really, really powerful evidence. And again, we've got evidence of what they did, and all of these things that we're learning, we're now being able to go back to our volunteers and say, guys, this is some of the stuff that we know that happens, and as we go on, we'll get even more sophisticated in the way that we do that. And we've been able to start now doing some social value return on investment calculations to look actually what has been the impact of these relationships and what's made the difference. And as I'm sure you can imagine, it's been quite significant across those programs. So that is where we're at. I think where do we go from here? Well, a couple of things really. We are super committed, as we always have been, to sharing this learning, to continue delivering what we're doing, but to continue learning and continue sharing it. And that's partly why we're here today. I think one of the things that really excites us is that a lot of the time, this kind of one-to-one support is often seen as a bit of a bolt-on, a bit of a nice to do, as I'm sure many of you will know. In fact, I think I put it in my emails 100 times, so apologies, but I was in Parliament yesterday giving evidence at an APPG inquiry with Become, who I know are here and supporting this. Thank you, Become, you are amazing. But one of the things that we had a conversation there was that whilst these services, they can often be seen as a bolt-on, because often it's really hard to evidence the impact that they make. We're now evidencing that impact. We're able to say, look, this is the difference it makes. If we want to sit here and talk, as I know we have to with commissioners at times, about, what's return on investment of doing something like this, it's really important that we can say, well, look, we know on average that this is the kind of progression young people will make towards NEET, and if they make that progression, what does that save other services, and so on. So I think it's super important that we can now use this to really evidence the impact. And my passion and my mission is to move this from a bolt on. I'm pretty sure most people here in this room today have known this in their gut instinct for years, that these services are super important, but it's just been so difficult to evidence. And if we can help evidence that, that's brilliant. And this is such a large data set. We now have over 33,000 interactions between volunteers and young people recorded, that we're actually able to evidence statistical significance. This isn't just that, oh, it happened once. There is a large enough data set that we can really prove that these kind of services are making a difference. But more importantly, that we can continually learn from them. And our ambition is not to just go, well, okay, we know, for example, those 5 principles of engagement work. Our kind of ambition is to go, well, let's make sure they work in 3 months' time, because young people change really quickly and the way they work change really quickly. So what can we continually learn and do from that? And as I say, continue sharing that with the sector and across different sectors. And the second thing is, and this has been asked for by so many of you, is whilst we did create Wowment for ourselves, we absolutely want to open that up to other partners, other people running similar programs. But I've been amazed by the most incredible and creative ideas that people have for how to use this technology. And we do want to make sure that others can use it and that others can make a difference with it in their own sector. So to give you an example, we've been contacted by a couple of social work teams where they want to use this between their social workers and their young people, so that they can look at resource planning, so that team leaders can start to understand, if this social worker's got this caseload, from that messaging that they're already doing through WhatsApp, they can understand the caseload and help them better balance that throughout their team. And dare I say, for reporting, saves the social workers having to copy and paste all of their WhatsApp conversations into their files. We can automatically feed that in. I've had another social worker team asking me that bit in the middle, can we do translation? And absolutely. So they were telling me the eye-watering amount they have to spend on translation services. And quite frankly, we could WhatsApp in English from a social worker and receive in Eritrean for a young person, as an example, and backwards and forwards. So there's all sorts of interesting things we can do in there. I know that there's some really interesting use cases in the NHS, and people have talked to me about workers on the ground in hospitals that then connect with young people. Forgive me, I forget the name of the service, but try and stop them ending up back in hospital, and it's a really great way. So we're really open to anything like that, and I know there's a load of really useful use cases, and anything we can do to help to kind of get that going, we would love to do that. So really that leads me just to finish a little bit, I suppose, with that mission. I'm sorry that this is so wordy, but we are now able to prove that these relationships make a difference. I am spending a lot of my time now talking to all sorts of different people to prove this, to do the work that I know so many of you do so incredibly well in your sectors and in your settings, making so much difference to all sorts, not just young people, but all sorts of different people that use different services. You make a massive difference. We want to evidence that, and we want to be able to show that, so that more resources can get put into services that genuinely work and genuinely make a difference, and so that we can keep learning. So that is my share. I hopefully that's been helpful. As you all should have received, if anyone is having problems getting hold of the report is available on email. So please do let us know. In there is so much more data and stats and stories and all sorts of things that will hopefully help share some of what we've learned here, and some of the details. We do also still continue to promise to sharing our learnings and our understandings. If you would rather not hear from us, please let us know. But we're sort of assuming that everybody's here, unless they've asked, would like to kind of hear if I'm back here in 6 months or 12 months time with more data and more insights. Of course, we will share those with you and continue to share us, but please do let us know if you would rather not. We will assume that you do want to. I'd love to open it up to questions. Samantha, I can see you've got your hand up. I'm not sure if that's just because there's something coming through, but yes, Samantha, did you want to kick us off?
We've got a question that has come out of the chat, and Colin is with us and has asked whether or not the LAs that we work with have mentioned us in their Ofsted reports as being evidence-based. And I did say that we have a few of our LA partners here with us today, so I'd like to hand it back over to you, Fran, if you wouldn't mind bringing in some of our LAs.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if any of our LAs would like to come off and share. I don't know if they've shared it in their Ofsted. Christine, I don't know. Did you have an Ofsted recent? I know that
I don't know
I'm
you're
going
going to pick on me there.
because you were
Um,
looking, you're there. Christine is, by the way, Christine is an absolutely amazing commissioner from Surrey County Council, a real champion for this program, and yeah, an absolute superstar.
yeah, so obviously we did just have Ofsted. Mentoring was mentioned, obviously because we've been in it from the start. It was based very much on the earlier days rather than what's happening now. But yeah, it was mentioned that mentoring was supporting some of our young people that we have at Surrey. Yeah.
Thanks, Chrissy. I mean, hopefully, as we go forward again, as we're able to produce and share more of this data, again, it's really sort of helpful to for for our LA partners, they've received this, but pretty much at the same speed as you guys. We've just wanted to get this out there as quickly as possible. But again, for individual, I know, for example, I'm up with Leicester City in a week or so, and we're really gonna hone in just on their data and look at what's been true just for them, so that they can use that. Any other questions? Oh, I've got a few coming in on the chat. Um, Let me have a look. Any other questions from anyone that's here in the room? Might need the team to help me on the chat, because there's quite a few messages in there. Sarah asked who were the LAs. Now you're going to test my memory. So BCP, which is Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole Council. We've got Surrey County Council, obviously, Leicester City, Northamptonshire Children's Trust, which is obviously part of Northamptonshire Council. And who have I forgotten? Because I've done them out of order. Southampton is our fifth one. Also, I should say that Dorset Council also were using Wowment through this programme, but we haven't included their data in the here. But again, they've had their own data review and have done some great work through that. Phil Jolly from Lewisham, who we've also been working with. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Hi, Fran. Yeah, good. And thanks, because yeah, I certainly enjoyed hearing a lot of that stuff, and it aligns a lot to the systems change work which we're trying to do, and the learning within the council, and some of the evaluation that we're doing more generally in place-based activity stuff. I really liked your last slide around preventative infrastructure. I didn't quite get a chance to note exactly the wording that you used, but mentoring as that prevention infrastructure. And I've been presenting on a health prevention group on Friday last week, where we were talking about similar. So it's really interesting to see the alignment. I think the thing I was pondering most on was the integration and warm handover stuff, because I think that's a bit in the council which we have not had a chance to manage to break the back of yet in our Youth Guarantee Trailblazer year one delivery. And I think this is where there's a difference between co-locating services and integrating services. And I've been banging on quite a lot about the difference between integration and co-location, and integration very often meaning the kind of the warm handover stuff. I was really interested in that element between the warm handover from statutory services and agencies through to trust building, through to then what you talked about, the crisis moments being de-escalated and that stuff being looped back into these statutory agencies, and understanding where does that fit into to a bigger picture. I think if you're commissioning outcomes, one of the outcomes, aside from the ETE and jobs stuff, I think is fine. But I think the very interesting thing for me is the de-escalation of those crisis moments, that then means that PAs, mentors, and EAs effectively become a much more systemic kind of underpinning of a young person's support.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting point, Phil, and I think this is why again, funny enough, it was one of the conversations we had in Parliament yesterday about the service, these kind of services. They can't often there's as if they're treated as a bolt-on, that doesn't usually work, and it has to be fully integrated. And that's one of the things that I know I've seen sort of Beth nodding along. Beth leads on our care leaver projects here, but Beth has built incredible relationships with the personal advisor teams, and interestingly enough, and Phil will know this from some of the work that we've done with him in Lewisham, those personal advisor teams, when it comes to care leavers and, dare I say, social workers team for children in care are so fundamental that we build that good relationship with them. And it's a trusted relationship as well, because sometimes these services could seem threatening to a personal advisor, thinking, oh, this is, you know, someone external checking up on my young person to see if I'm doing my job correctly or whatever. So I think Beth spent a huge amount of time building those relationships and the trust, which then became very much a two-way thing, so that the personal advisor could refer that young person in, but also when there were those challenges and those moments, that Beth could pick up the phone to that personal advisor and go, look, we, you know, the mentor's just made us aware that this young person's going through this, you know, what are the other services that we should be signposting to them? And that's when you start to get the integration. Interestingly, the mentors also appear to be in a super unique position. And I know I've seen a few of our amazing mentors, and I think some of them are giving some lovely evidence in the, or lovely testimonials in the chat. So thank you guys. But some of our mentors are in a really unique position to signpost. So again, where things can be like statutory services, and often we've had a few sort of jovial conversation, shall I say, with personal advisors, where the mentor has recommended or signposted a young person to something that the personal advisor has told that young person about so many times, and they've never taken it up. But once the mentor does it, because that dynamic of that relationship is different, the young person has actually gone, okay, yeah, no, maybe I should look at this. And they've got the time and the framing to do that. So that's where, again, having this person that's maybe outside the system but is well connected through an intermediary such as ourselves, you can start to then integrate everything. I think it's one thing I would say, occasionally personal advisors and the mentor have got connected, and we always ask to be kept in that loop. That sometimes works, but I think it's better when it comes to an intermediary, so that we can sort of manage those connections and support that, but make sure that there is that linking into all the other services, and it really does become a connection to a range of services. Does that answer your question, Phil? Yeah, cool, perfect. Elaine, thank you. I think you're next person with your hand up.
I am. Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation, and all the work that you put in is absolutely fantastic, and I can see how it will really engage young people. I'm a founder of the Mentoring Lab, and we at the Mentoring Lab have gone deep into how tech can support relationships, especially from the grassroots. So I'm from the grassroots, I've got lived experience. We've developed an asset-led mentoring platform called Mentoring for Youth. Okay. I've got a couple of questions, if I think I've got three. So first of all, it would be great to hear from one of your mentors to learn more about the mentoring that was done, and also if you had a framework for them to deliver youth mentoring, or was it more of befriending? Like, how long did the befriending happen until the actual mentoring took place? And then also for yourselves, really, typically how long were the relationships? How long did they last, or were they still ongoing?
Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, so on the mentor experience, I'm not going to embarrass some of the mentors. I can see them. Nikki, I can see you, and I know Nikki, I think she's already put an amazing comment in the chat. So do have a look through the chat, because I can see there's some amazing showing of experiences. Also, Len, we can share with you some of our case studies as well, which just might be a good way to do that. But in terms of the framework, we do provide quite a bit of training to our volunteers. I know we've probably got the amazing Dr. Judy Gannon on the call here today, who is one of the, I always embarrass Judy, but she's amazing, one of the world's leaders in coaching and mentoring. She's a professor at Oxford Brookes University, that's the home to the International Centre of Coaching and Mentoring. And we co-designed a mentor training with Dr. Judy and her team at Oxford Brookes. So all of our mentors get that training that also then gives them some quite set frameworks that they can use. But then we then also give them some further training that talks about this setting, because sometimes the strong frameworks are not appropriate for the young people. So we very much make sure that this is led by the young people, and the mentors are encouraged to, and I think with the vulnerability of the young people that come to us, some of them, I can see Ross is here as well. Now, I know Ross has a real he's very, very structured in the way that he delivers his mentoring. And it depends really on the needs of the young person. So we encourage the mentors to really go, what does this young person need? Let them lead it, and go from there. So there is structure, but it's a flexible structure, shall we say. And in terms of how long the relationships are lasting, I would say the good ones are lasting a long time. We've done programs where we've done short relationships before. Occasionally we get asked by clients to do short 3-4 month relationships. And it's really tough because, again, it depends on the young people. Where we run programs that are maybe not with vulnerable young people, then 3 months can be effective. But whenever there's a level of vulnerability, it's going to take longer to build trust. So we always ask for our mentors for a minimum commitment of 12 months. Majority of our mentors come to us hoping that they will commit a lot more than that. And if it does ever end in 12 months, we very, very carefully manage that transition out. It doesn't just stop and end. It's these relationships are sacred. But as I can say, looking around, even the pictures that I've got in front of me, that people in the room, many of them are going on a lot longer than 12 months, and many of them have told me this will be for life, you're not getting rid of me, which is absolutely wonderful, and we love, because I think the relationship that the mentor builds eventually it goes beyond a mentor relationship. It becomes a supportive, a lifelong supportive relationship. One of the things that's interesting, I'm sorry if I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but you will all hear now the government talking, and those of you that are in the sector will hear the government talking about lifelong loving relationships. It's very ungovernmental language previously, and actually I think most people are actually really pleased that the government is talking about loving relationships, especially when it comes to the care sector. And that's actually what fundamentally is getting built here, is these relationships that become lifelong. They become that person that maybe they don't message the frequency they have because they go off and get a job, or they go to uni, or they're moving on with their lives. But I suspect, and as I say, looking at some of the faces in the room here today, that if we turn up in 10-20 years, they'll still be meeting and they'll still be connecting. And actually that's what we want for these young people. We want them to have those long-term relationships. Hopefully that answers your question, Elaine. Thank you so much. I can see, Samantha, you've got your hand up, which I'm assuming is to bring something in from the chat, as you so wonderfully do.
So Nikki, who is one of our wonderful mentors on Care Leave program, part of the question, or part of the observation that she's put into the chat, it includes a question that says, wondering if there's any evidence of the mentees successfully broadening their social circle through mentoring.
Nikki, brilliant question. Absolutely there is. It's actually not something, it's a really good question. We'll go and inspect the data and actually pull out some stats on it, because it's a beautiful thing. Once you've got the data set, you can ask it all sorts of interesting questions. But one of the things that the trends that it picks up is that the mentors specifically help the young people increase their social networks. So whilst they might help them with practical skills and things like that, they also help them increase their social network. So for example, it's very common for us to see a mentor saying to a young person, why don't you go and join the local football club? I'll come with you, help you get set up, and so on. And that then connects them with a whole new network. So very much in their society, in their community, it helps them. Interestingly enough, another thing that we've seen is the mentor doesn't actually have to live locally as well to do that, because our original assumption was that the mentor had to live in the same area to help them open up those networks, to kind of go, this is my football club, why don't you come join my football club? But actually we're seeing in the data that it doesn't even have to be that. It could be that they help them find the interest, and then they say, oh, well, how can we relate this to your community? How can we find something locally to you that will work? And they help that young person go through that journey. So it is something that we see, and it's something that's super important. Again, we're talking about young people where I think is it 80% say that they feel lonely most of the time. One of the most valuable things we can do is create networks for them, not just this mentor being that network, but having a range of other people being the networks around it. But I think it's a brilliant question, Nikki, and I think we will go and do some further deep diving and see if we can see what works and what doesn't work. We know it happens, but we haven't inspected how and what works best. So yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Nikki, for being an amazing mentor as well, because I know you do some awesome work. Any other question? Yeah, Nikki's also said in the chat she is in her 3rd year of working with her mentee. So again, in answer to your question, Elaine, here we have living proof. Nikki, I know messages her mentee a huge amount, and they've done some amazing stuff together. So just absolutely amazing. And can I, Nikki, I hope you don't mind me embarrassing you, but Nikki she's a mother. She has a career. She has a lot going on in her life, and yet she finds time to be with this young person. And I think that's another really wonderful thing about this service is that we are bringing in people who otherwise may not have connected. These young people wouldn't have the opportunity to connect with, and because they can message in these ways, because they can do these relationships and have that flexibility, they're able to volunteer what on the outside feels like a vast amount of time, but probably on the inside, they often tell us, oh no, it's just the odd message here and there. But we look at it and we go, oh no, God, you guys are like doing loads. But it feels very achievable for volunteers to come through, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure to say pretty rewarding as well. Chloe, please do jump in. This is the wonderful Chloe from Become. Those of you who don't know her, they're an amazing charity that do all sorts of work with children in care and care leavers. So yeah, Chloe, welcome.
Thanks so much, Van, and what a fantastic presentation, but even more importantly, fantastic work and use of tech and digital opportunities really to support this brilliant work. So thank you for today. I guess my question, and just for context, before I ask it, I guess for us at Become, we're delivering an accredited personal advisor development program, so an accredited training program. And of course, we want to make sure that over time that remains relevant to what young people leaving care are experiencing and the support that they therefore would most value from their leaving care PA. And we also have a care advice service and web advice on lots of the common issues that we hear young people facing as they leave care.
Yeah.
Again, we want that to remain current to young people's experiences and maybe the challenges that they encounter. So that's just for context where I'm coming from, I guess. I can see that there are lots of ways that you could use some of the data that comes through the Wowman platform or tech, given that it could give a real picture of some of those common issues and challenges. I guess it could help you equip mentors with the most up-to-date and relevant signposting information. It could help you think about top-up kind of training, whether it's lunch and learns or whatever. And it could enable you to share with local authorities commissioning this, the kind of support that maybe PAs could be thinking about that they might not otherwise have heard about. So there's just so many things that it makes me think about if you were analysing it to see the challenges young people were kind of encountering and talking to their mentors about. I guess my question is, given all of that, have you reviewed the data with those kind of challenges insights in mind? And
yes. So it was brilliant context and brilliant question, Chloe. So yeah, actually in the report, one of the things that we've gone through is some of the key trends that we see. So to give you an example, 7 of the young people were going through the criminal justice process. And so that's required. And so we've sort of looked at that and gone, for our mentors, we now need to provide some support around that. So in fact, actually, when I talk about what's next, one of the things that we're doing in Goal 17 next is Joe, who may well be on this call, who's our head of training. He is now starting to look at this data and go, right, what do we need? There's an element of what do we need to prepare mentors for at the very beginning. And I think actually being able to share with them some of this real evidence-based data of these are the kind of things. But then also when when a mentor discovers that perhaps one of their the young person they're supporting is now in custody, for example, we will then also be able to train exactly what support is best for them. And that's actually a live example that we're going through at the moment, is how best to support through that. So there is that element, I think, in terms of our mentors, that we're looking at all of these things and we're looking at the trends of what is it, so that the new mentors that come in can be even more better prepared. But there's this balance, I think, between sort of bombarding them with too much. And so I think the way that we're looking at it is that we'll have a kind of an initial, this is what you might expect, and then a kind of, if this happens, come shout, because then we've got some experience or resources or training. But the nice thing about this, for example, is it doesn't just end there. So for example, a great example is in the crisis points. When we discovered that there were all these crisis points, we were then able to pick up 5 trends again. I think it was 5 or 6 trends that are in the report about what helped de-escalate. And so again, if somebody has a crisis point, we can go, well, based on the evidence, we know that these are the things that you could do that will help that young person de-escalate that crisis. A lot of that seems to be coming quite naturally, which is really lovely. But again, we're starting to be able to compare the ones that go well and the ones that don't go so well and so on. So definitely internally we'll be using it. And again, want to keep sharing best practice and what we're learning from that. I think the point that you make, Chloe, about sharing that with personal advisors is really interesting. And I think as we get, I suspect as we get bigger data sets, and I think as I've mentioned, a few local authorities are asking about their personal advisor teams using this themselves, that we'll start to be able to again see more trends that we can then feed into organisations like yourself to go, these are the common things that people are that young people are asking for help with, and receiving support with. It really is this little window into what's always happened, but we can now kind of see it, which is great. Does that answer your question, Chloe?
It absolutely does.
Fab.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious we've only got a minute or so left. Emma has got her hand up, as has Ross. I will stay on a little bit later for anyone that wants to, but I promise I will follow up after. Emma, did you want to hit us with your... Actually, Emma, bear with me 1 second. I do want to really respect people's time, as we are pretty much at 12 o'clock. I do appreciate that people will need to jump off. So I just, before everyone goes, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of you for being here and supporting this. Every one of you that's here is here because, quite frankly, you give a damn about the services that you deliver. So thank you so much for giving your time to be here. But also massive thank you to all of our volunteers who just every day amaze me with the stuff that they do. And also a massive thank you to all of our clients. I know we've spoken to Christine. I've seen Ray pop up here, you know, again, that have come on this journey with us, that have stood by us when maybe the results weren't what we wanted to see, and have worked with us so well on this. So thank you to those guys. A massive thank you to the Goal 17 team. All of the people that are in the organisation do the most incredible job with such dedication, and so much of what I'm sharing for you here, I know it's me that's sharing it, but it is their development and the stuff that they've done. So I'm so thank you to all of them, and of course to our young people. I don't think we've got any young people here. I don't think they're interested in this. They just want to get on with their lives, which is fair enough. But I want to extend a thank you to them. So thank you so much, everyone. We will share the recording and the report and keep in contact. If anybody would like to reach out to us for further questions, or if they want to find out about using Wowment, please just reach out to myself or anyone in the team, and we will connect you up. And I will stay here and answer Emma and Ross's questions, but if anyone else needs to go, please do go. And thank you so much. Look forward to catching up with you all soon.